everyone. Welcome back to IT Horror Stories with Jack Smith. I am, as always, again and again, and still forever, Jack Smith. And today I am across the virtual table talking to Christoph. Hey, sir, how are you doing?
I am fine. How are you today?
As I always say, good enough. That's the thing.
That's the thing. I usually settle for still alive because it's a good baseline to start from.
True. It's really good because still alive can mean you or your network.
I mean, the network is usually more alive than me, depending on workloads. It's
It's one of those days.
It's always one of those days.
To quote Morticia Adams, don't torture yourself.
Yeah, we have other people for that, indeed.
That's a different podcast. You came to me because you had some IoT things in the smart city world. I'm going to give you the microphone, dear Christoph, and I am going to jump in left and right if I have something sensible to tell or ask a question. The virtual floor is yours, my friend.
This is a long time ago. We're talking more than a decade ago. I really hope a lot of these things were fixed now. I have a gut feeling that some of this might still be relevant, but let's hope it's not.
Well, we will change names to protect the guilty. So
imagine large city, smart city project about 10 years ago during the big hype where everything had to be smart. It was before everything had to be AI, everything had to be smart.
Yes.
It's not an important thing. 10 million inhabitants, very large city with a history of more than 1,000 years. So you're also dealing with decrepit infrastructure or multiple generations infrastructure. Some stuff has still been built in the time of the Romans. Some of it is a bit more recent. They just put in a large amount of smart stuff. Everything had to be connected. They won't have like those fancy dashboards in a giant control room where they can zoom in on everything and control the entire city.
That was their request. They wanted that.
So that's what they built. But it was also around the time when the Snowden revelations started to come out, so there was a bit more awareness about building those kinds of situations where maybe other people also want to have a look at it. So someone had the smart idea, okay, let's spend 4 weeks to audit this entire shit and get people to take it apart and have a look.
So let's get in the white hats and the black hats.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
It was a very interesting environment. Like I said, a high degree of complexity, a high degree in high variation in age as well. Also, if you can imagine a network technology, it will have been there. So 2G, 4G, wireless links, fiber, ADSL, copper, RS-485. If you want it somewhere, it is going to be there.
I haven't heard wireless point-to-point connections yet, but that's going to be there as well, I guess.
Yes, just quite a few towers. Sometimes it's easier to put a wireless point-to-point than drill a hole through a mountain.
Yes, because that's called a tunnel.
They have everything there. And then we start off with just the classic mapping stuff. One of the things which comes out with the classic mapping is that it is very open. So you have a lot of different VLANs, you have a lot of IP space, but it is very little to no firewalling in between all the different segments.
Okay.
Another problem we had was reusing IP ranges on different sites. So you would have routed segments with the same IP range where they did routing magic to make things work.
Okay.
That did not scale. Nobody knew what was where, documentation just not there. So if you wanted to start something, you just pick any private IP range and map the /24 and see what comes out. And if nothing comes out, drive to the other side of the city and try again and see if you get something else.
So a mishmash of hardware, no documentation, setups as long as it works, various old installations left and right. I have to ask, what could go wrong?
You could add a moving element to it, as in put it in a bus and have the network move around. That also makes your life a lot easier when you're not sure, as in, is it disconnected? Is the bus in a tunnel? You don't know why and how something is going to be available.
So they also had the entire public transport on that smart city network, or they tried to anyway?
Yes, the public Wi-Fi network, because obviously free Wi-Fi had to be everywhere. So
of course, yes. It's those days, where every city had to bring free Wi-Fi for everybody. Yes. Okay.
And then everything that could broadcast Wi-Fi, I mean, it did broadcast Wi-Fi. Sometimes it was split, sometimes it was not.
Flip a coin and see if somebody has set it up, I guess.
It depends. So in the big locations, like things like malls or public squares, it was reasonably split. So you would have separate VLANs and you would have firewall in between.
Good.
In the smaller nodes, it was not that great. If you would typically look at the setup of a bus, you would have a bunch of security cameras in a bus. You would have an NVR with a local hard drive that would record everything in case it loses connectivity.
Yep.
And it would have an LTE modem without outdoor antennas for the uplink for the DVR. So we use that uplink for the public Wi-Fi in the bus and for the signs that say which is your next stop and which is your track there.
Everything to the same link. Okay.
Yeah. So everything to the same link, but you would have the VLAN with the screen that shows you your next stop, and the DVR, and you would have a VLAN for the customers.
Doing that 10 years ago was optimistic. Certainly in a city with many buildings and not always the best 4G data connection. Intrigued at the moment. Do continue.
So it did work, but the nodes in the buses, they could do different VLANs. However, they could not firewall between the VLANs. Yeah. If you knew the IP range of the other side, you could get there. You would have to know the IP range of the other side, but it was not hard to find because obviously everything is labeled, and the display with the next stop will have a DIMO label with the IP address of it.
And you said there was no documentation. Come on, everything is labeled in the field. Isn't that great?
Yeah, that is great until it's not that great. Because it's not that the label doesn't always match what's in the box.
Oh no, but you have a chance. You could have ended up at least in the correct subnet VLAN or Class C. Come on, be optimistic.
The thing is, when those buses go back to a depot, when a bus breaks down and it gets decommissioned, they get parted out and everything gets reused.
And then the mix-up happens.
Yeah, especially those ceiling-mounted displays. They fail all the time, so they just have a box with spare ones there, and then it comes in, it's broken again, or it's vandalized. They take it off, put a different one in.
And then, of course, they don't reconfigure it to the new bus. They just keep it as is.
Well, they do reconfigure to the bus, but they don't update the labels. No. Why would you?
That's a different team. This is the not my job column in Jira.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, it worked reasonably well. I'm surprised it worked at that scale, because you could also use the app on your phone to see when your bus would arrive, as accurate as it could be in that amount of traffic. Same with like the little screen, like the little grayscale LCD screens on the bus stops that tell you how long to wait.
Well, looking at it, like that for 10 years ago was pretty impressive, because even today, I know cities where that still doesn't work. Technology-wise, nice to have it working, but then I guess working is one and securing it is two.
Yeah, so at some point, you just start mapping that network. One of the things that immediately popped out there was a very large amount of security cameras, which makes sense from a smart city and a monitoring perspective.
Yeah, indeed.
But it became very obvious that there was no plan behind the cameras. So when they needed a new site or a new location, they just ordered a pallet of 100, they put them up, and they were done with it.
Probably different brands, different tech, different everything, just whatever was on the market.
It was whatever they could get in the media market.
Ouch. Okay, well, it is very pragmatic and very solution-minded, but not the way you should do this.
It was also a broad spectrum, like so the very high-quality ones that are on squares with PTZ and decent lenses. I mean, as those were the decent brands and they were supported. But whenever you go outside of those big visible spots, they just had they had to take the checkbox. We need monitoring. We need to be able to contain things. So just put them on there. So you also get a giant pile of those desktop NVRs, those little shitty boxes with half a terabyte of spinning lists in there, 5 or 8 power over Ethernet ports, and very Chinese firmware.
Well, it's Chinese, so red flag 1, red flag 2, red flag 3.
Yeah, it is indeed a red flag, right? But like a yellow star in there, right?
Yes.
There was also no centralized management, because you have a giant pile of smaller decentralized NVRs. So they are not centrally managed, so the firmware and software releases are also all over the place. Same with credential management. Some of them had their password changed. Some of them had the default password. Some of them were out of date and vulnerable. Some of them were not out of date, but still vulnerable. It was a mess. To this date, I'm not even sure they will have managed to clean this up, given the volume of NVRs that had to be traced. A lot of them were also in cupboards, on desks, in guard rooms.
Unless they do a site refresh or move an office or close an office, those will not be changed ever.
No, they will be changed when they break down, and not necessarily when they break down and someone notices it.
Yeah,
because
indeed.
You're not necessarily sure that someone will notice it when it breaks down.
If it starts beeping in alarm, they just close the door so that they don't hear the beep anymore.
No, you unplug it so it doesn't beep anymore.
Well, yeah, you could do that as well, and then it's like, not my problem. And then, if you have no centralized management or monitoring, they don't see that the NVR is offline, and then nobody knows for 5 years. Oh, this is wonderful already.
It's also fun when you need to start doing police investigations, right?
Yes.
If you're trying to track a suspect, I mean, on paper they're smart and they can follow all those things, but in reality, it takes them weeks to just trace a simple walk, right?
Don't miss an episode. Subscribe now on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and more. Support us by leaving a like or a review. You can always find more at ithorrorstories.eu, and we're just an email away at hello@ithorrorstories.eu.
You have to see at which time someone walked past, see where the next camera is, then see how much in or out of sync that camera was, guesstimate how many seconds would take to the next one, and then rebuild it throughout the entire. I've done that a few times in buildings. Imagine that doing in city. It takes a while, yes.
It takes a while, and it was also, like I said, badly managed. So there was no service agreement with the Chinese vendor. So they were paying a lot of money for some relatively crappy Chinese cameras. In the meanwhile, Hikvision has gone a lot better at their cameras, but the early to mid 2010 ones were not the best. They were the ones you got when you couldn't afford the good ones. It's a lot better now, but it didn't used to be the case. However, if you go through even a vendor like this, say, look, we need to deploy 25,000 of them. We need to have these guarantees. We need to set up like that. They would fly someone over to fix that problem.
Yeah, indeed.
But because they bought them in amounts of 50 to 100 and use a small DNVRs, they never got that leverage to talk to this vendor to fix some of the issues they were having.
Sadly, that's pretty common. If you do your security per square or per mall or per shopping street, and then you lift your security budget from there, you have to do 50, 100 batches to do that area and then continue, and then work with completely isolated NVRs and then just nothing interlinked, I guess.
Also patching those things, because patching one camera takes a while, patching 10 cameras takes a while, but patching a lot more of them takes a while as well.
Yep.
So you would have some of them on vulnerable firmware with the known exploits at the time. Some of them were patched because they bought them new enough that they were already patched. Some of them were not. It was also not uncommon for a firmware update to fail and to break the camera, because you're dealing with a camera in a hostile location. It's powered via PoE, or if you're lucky, it's exposed to the elements and members of the general public. So you never really know if it's going to come back up or not if you patch it.
If it's up on a traffic pole, it's not an easy one to the high. Can you push the reset button for 5 seconds? That's not happening.
I mean, you could do that, but that was no guarantee it would work again.
No, step one: get the cherry picker and block the intersection.
Honestly, the best solution there is to have a box of pre-patched, pre-configured one with the monitoring settings there. Send a low voltage electrician out there and put a new one up.
Yeah,
the only way to do it. Like the only way to fix this problem at the scale they had to fix it, and that was the recommendation in the end, is buy 10,000 new ones, fix them, configure them properly, and use that as an opportunity to start negotiations with the vendor and swap out all the existing ones bit by bit and build out a deployment plan.
And then you're surprised why some projects cost double the money because you're buying everything twice.
Add 50% margin because you're still in a country that doesn't necessarily have the same standards as most of the rest of the world have. So you need to add some layers for corruption, some layers for equipment being stolen or resold.
Corruption. Additional services, please. Additional services.
Additional services is one thing, but also an ongoing risk is equipment going missing, right?
Yep.
Tools being accidentally being displaced. It's not that much, but at a scale, you're losing a significant amount.
If you're losing 1 out of every 15 cameras or 1 out of every 20 NVRs, it adds up really quickly. Yeah.
Yeah. When looking through the camera footage we found, we also found the classic public paid for parking lots. So they would have an access barrier. You drive up in there, it would do an ANPR scan, you take a ticket, you would drive in, park, pay for the ticket, leave. Very classic setup. Now that the thing had a PLC in there to control the barrier, so you would have a security guard sitting in one of those phone booths that's overlooking it with a very stern face. So
yes.
if the barrier fails or you're stuck there, you can push the button to open it. He's to unblock traffic, and off you go. Now that button was a web interface. The barrier had a web interface with like even a little tiny animation that makes the barrier go up and down.
Schmancy, nice.
It was fun.
Somebody did actual UI design. I am impressed.
Yeah, it was not only was it fancy, it was color correct. It had the right shade of orange and the right white and red striping, and the animation on the web UI matched the state of the barrier.
Damn.
So it was like they put a lot of engineering in there.
Yeah, no, I am actually impressed because usually, if you're lucky, it's a green dot. Cool. Okay, but I feel a butt coming.
What they did not put any engineering in was authentication and authorization.
What could go wrong?
As in, not only was it not enabled, it was just simply not available in the solution. You could not enable it. Like there was no option in the product to add a password to the UI.
So if you found the website on the management interface, the barrier was yours.
Well, you had a little button to make the barrier yours, and you could look at the animation. And if you combine that with a giant routed network with little to no firewalling, it becomes fun.
So that means that from in a bus 20 kilometers away, you could still open that barrier because everything was wide open.
If you weren't in a dark spot for reception.
Yeah. Let's be optimistic that you were parked next to a big mall in your bus waiting so that you had coverage. Yes, let's have some optimism here.
But obviously we found that web interface, but then we had things. So we have this as a finding, but this just looks stupid if you look at that, right? So there's no way that it's real. It just looks like a demo or one of those samples they put somewhere. So it's like, cool. Thing is a couple of kilometers away. Let's just take our Minder in our translator. We drive there and we park the car outside and we see what actually happens when we sit there. So we sit outside there in the car there, look at the barrier, look at the security guard, push the button, goes open and closed, push the button again, open and closed. And meanwhile, you see that security guard like, So and then at some point we get out of our official looking car with someone that looks official, because you go there and then ask them ask the security guard what's going on here, and you ask the security what's going on, like why is this barrier opening and closing for no reason? A security guard with the confidence of it all, so like, oh yeah, that's completely normal, happens all the time. It happens when it rains.
Sure.
We were like, yeah, sure. I also had to contain my laughing there, right?
Well, probably that's the reason he found for it, because he has no idea on the complete openness of the backend. So it's probably the link he noticed, which is something.
Which makes sense, right? It's been such an easy one. There was also a really hard one to fix because the vendor of that thing, it did not exist anymore. It was a PLC-based thing. It was a badge designed for them. The consultancy that made it, not there anymore. How do you solve that? You can't really put it behind a web application firewall authentication because it's a local device on the network. there is something to do there. In the end, the solution there is disconnect it from the network and use a manual actuator input on the thing to wire a very long cable with a push button to the security guard's phone booth.
So basically disable the entire IoT thing and disable the ANPRs and everything
Well, the ANPR is separate, right? That's
okay. So that was not linked. Okay, fine. Yeah.
It was just a switch with a bunch of network equipment there. One of them was for the barrier, one of them for that.
Okay, so you would always have someone that in the management interface opened and closed, and instead of a web page, he got a button. Yep. That's not the worst workaround.
It's not the worst workaround, but you have to put a lot of them in, and it is a physical change, which involves pulling cabling, installing a button.
Oh, yes. Yes, and then the actual human change factor is a thing.
A big red button is relatively easy to deal with. Putting in the cabling is also, you can easily spend a couple of hours per site, right? If the barrier is on the middle block in the road there, you need to get a cable from that side to the other side. The asphalt will have been paved over there already, so...
Yeah. If you're lucky, you have a duct. If you're unlucky, you get to dig up the asphalt.
No. If you're lucky, you get to dig up the asphalt. If you're unlucky, you dig up the asphalt and you break something else and you can fix other things.
Well, that's called job security. And then you learn that you put 4-meter-long point-to-point radio antennas on the roof of the little shed. And then when it rains, you actually have a reason why it doesn't work when it rains.
I think nowadays we would use LoRaWAN for things like that, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Today there's different solutions for that, but back then when the world wanted free Wi-Fi everywhere...
I mean, at least it's not an IR remote, because we've had cases in other cities where they used infrared remotes to control the traffic lights, so a bus driver could get priority in an intersection. And people discovered that, and then they recorded the IR codes with their universal TV remotes.
And beep. But the good thing is you still had the human in a phone booth. I'm going to quickly jump into one of our first episodes, Crashing Helsinki Airport, number 2, where I had something quite similar but different. It was a parking garage. Everything was very, very IoT. So they would scan your license plate, ANPR, and you would drive in and drive out after you paid, either on a terminal, which at the airport I crashed because my license plate is not the Finnish ABC 123 standard. And then the human had to come with a little van to open the door. But secondly, in Tampere, a few hours north of Helsinki, where you had to pay using an app, but the app would only work with Finnish phone numbers. And I don't have a Finnish phone number.
So in Belgium, we have a very similar problem with paying for buses. Like they removed all the places where you can buy a ticket.
Correct.
And when I was still living in another country and coming back here, I would have to use my foreign number in the app. So the app would support foreign phone numbers, but if your foreign number had more digits than a Belgian number, the input field would block because you could only enter a maximum number of digits, which was a Belgian number.
So at the 0, 1, 2, 3, 1, and then 6 something. So about if you had more than say 10 digits, you were SOL.
Yeah.
Oh, lovely.
And given how fond we were from foreign payment cards, that was a really fun period.
There was a time in Helsinki when you had a foreign phone, you could not use the app for public transport because they blocked all non-Finnish devices because they were getting DDoSed by their neighbors to the east quite a lot. So they just blocked everything that was not from Finland back then. That was they've had it fixed. They reactivated it like 2 years ago. It worked again, and then suddenly it didn't work anymore. I think there's some kind of strange kill switch in the Helsinki cloud where they say, well, foreigners can pay yes or no. But indeed, when there are no actual terminals anymore to pay, that works. Although now you can just use your debit card mostly. Well, in some cities, not everywhere, and then you're still.
This podcast features Jack Smith and guests. We say thank you to our demo scene friends who helped making this podcast possible. Commander Homer for editing, Danko for music and audio advice, NetPoet for additional voiceovers.
thing is that some of these things depend on assumptions where people assume this is always going to be true.
Yeah.
But it is not always true.
Far
a typical case with parking lots and ANPR in a lot of places is not every vehicle has a license plate in the front. Another typical case, especially if you're looking at trailers, if a trailer weighs more than a certain amount, it needs to have its own license plate, and the license plate of the vehicle towing the trailer will be different than the trailer itself.
Yeah.
These are all sorts of exceptions that a lot of these systems, the people that built those systems don't know them,
now
so
that
they
you
don't
mention
impact
it,
them.
even with the front license plate, because the camera is aimed at the front center of the car, and then you have someone with an Alfa Romeo with a license plate on the side, and that doesn't work.
Or you have those very fancy hybrid cars in London that just put it behind the windshield because there is nowhere else to put the plate. There's just physically no space to put the plate.
Yeah, because also those UK licenses are huge. Yeah,
standard European format, right?
I don't know. Actually, I'm not that savvy on UK license plates. I just know that they tend to be pretty large.
So it's a European standard, as everything gets standardized. But they're acrylic plates, and metal plates you can bend. Acrylic plates you break.
True, indeed. Speaking as an Alfa Romeo driver, I can confirm the breaking of the acrylic plates because there's a very slight bend on the license plate in the front, and yes, that's suddenly like, hey, my license plate is gone, and then you find half of it still attached and half of it is somewhere because crack.
But yeah, so we finished that spot. Another recurring problem in that environment was a lot of Windows 7 machines vulnerable to Eternal Blue. There was just, a couple of months old publicly released from the NSA leaks, one of these exploits. It worked really well, and you could pivot very good through that network. But then we end up with questions in why do we have so many Windows 7 machines that are still unpatched, that are connected on the network and connected to the internet, so they should have been patched, but that are easily that you can just put Metasploit in there and take them over.
And I guess looking at the size, hundreds of thousands of machines?
About 700 in total.
Oh, that's a nice botnet waiting for you, ready to go.
But yeah, so then we looked at some of those machines, and the common denominator of these machines was the updates were forcibly disabled. The underlying reason why the updates were forcibly disabled was software piracy. They all run cracked software, either Windows or other software cracks, and they disabled software updates to be able to keep on using their cracked licenses.
That is one way of doing it, although for the last 20 years, I know some company in Redmond has said, as long as it's patched, we don't care if you have a license key, but okay, sure, that's one way of working.
It was also very clearly builds that were done by the nephew from the boss. Sort of things.
Of course, yeah. Like, I know a guy, and then for a special assistance fee, let's not call it corruption, he will provide all the PCs. Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of the classic cases where corruption happens, right? You charge for Windows licenses, you can skim 100 euros a device off.
Times 700 is good money.
Yep, I'm not saying that this is what happened here. There was no evidence of that.
Oh no, the correct word is allegedly.
I don't even think it's allegedly here. I think it is just chaos. That a lot of them were, you just have a very large network, and these were all just individual instances of 3 or 4 machines being deployed like this by unconnected people, because you're dealing with a very large network with a lot of people.
From what I've heard, there was no overall plan what had to happen when and how do we interconnect this. You do one street after another street after another square after another 5 buses for that bus depot, and then magically you had to link it all up. That's what you end up with.
The main thing is, and this was a prestige project, it had to sparkle and it had to be shiny. It does not necessarily had to be secure or have to work.
It's a must-win project, and how we win it, we don't care.
Yeah.
If you can invoice on those are the best ones.
I know.
Money is not the issue, as long as it works. Awesome.
And it did work.
Yeah, obviously.
That was the beauty of this. All this worked. Because if you just walk around in a city like that, this is one specific city where I know this is a state. I've been to other places where don't open a street cabinet, you will cry.
Yep.
Like if you open the average comms cabinet on the side of the road,
indeed, you fall to your knees and you start crying, and you are surprised, how does this even work? So yeah, I'm pretty sure that the setup back then, and just having basically citywide coverage, and you walk from the shopping mall into the bus, and unless the bus goes into a tunnel or whatever, and you keep your connection and everything still works, you have all your NVRs uploading and requesting stuff. It is a very, very nice system, and when it has to work, then you declare it live, and sadly you don't look back, because you might break something, and that's bad publicity.
not only do you break things, people also rely on it. Especially if some of it is also used for access control. It's used for a metro system.
Yeah.
If it's used for a metro system, it also becomes a source of income, because those metro systems are very busy.
Yeah.
They generate a lot of revenue, especially from tourists.
Yeah.
If you start losing that revenue, it quickly becomes a problem.
As you did the audit, were there some recommendations? Were they implemented, or was it more like, here's the report, our job is done here? What was the outcome of all of this? Because obviously there's many minor issues which could create one single large one, but did anybody care?
So the problem was people care, but not the right people.
Of course.
Which is always the case. Like a lot of them were like a lot of minor things, but 250 pages of minor things.
Yeah.
Which also makes it really hard to come up with a strategy to how do we fix 90% of these problems with 10% of the quote unquote work. There is no easy overarching strategy. No. Things like dealing with the cameras, the entire decentralized lack of architecture. That's the one I know they probably implement, or at least I hope, is start over. As in start negotiations with the vendor. Okay, look, we're buying 25,000 of those.
Yeah.
What guarantees can you provide us, and fly half an airplane of people over to help us make this work?
Yep.
If you put that kind of order with that amount of thousands of NVRs with all the storage and the control pings,
you will find someone to help you with that. Yeah, indeed.
Same with the management and the firmware updates and the centralized logging there. Getting the vendor involved there was a big recommendation there. That should have happened at this point, I hope.
If there is a one sheet that you would give today for any city that says, hey, we want to be smart with many IoT things and public Wi-Fi, and we want to see cameras in every bus and in every subway, if you could give them a one sheet, what would, from your experience, what would you put in there?
Start treating that network as a public internet. As in, stop treating that network as a management network and start treating that network as a public network. Because there is no way you're going to be able to isolate all those devices and keep them isolated. You have too many different kinds of network equipment, too many different kinds of devices. As in, every single device needs to be secured on its own.
So then also standardization on as few vendors as possible.
Yeah, but even that is not always realistic.
Oh, no, no, absolutely not. No, agreed.
But if you have an NVR or a camera in a network, you should be able to treat that as if it's a laptop in a public Wi-Fi, where the thing itself is secure, the thing itself has a firewall, or at least a decent amount of access control, because you don't know how it's going to connect and how it's going to be deployed.
And do your software licensing and do your software lifecycle management, do all your patching, and have an actual follow-up. But yeah, that is a very large run phase that I guess most don't prepare for.
Yeah, because indeed those compromised Windows machines, either they will still be there or they have been replaced. If you look at the upgrade cycles, the only way to deal that is wait until they break down or until they're replaced by Windows 10, 11 machines.
That they get replaced by something else. And then, of course, you're going to see that in some small corner office out in the outskirts of the city, there's still going to be 4 of them doing whatever on a front-end application. And if you're lucky, they're locked when you're logged in with local admin on the desktop.
Because centralized management there means giving everybody their devices. Because you have that wide of a network, that wide of a deployment, you need to start giving everybody a new device. make sure the devices are standardized and secure, and that they have monitoring the devices. There is no recovery from such a chaos. The only thing you can do is build the green fields and slowly start breaking down the chaos.
I think this is a good message to end on. Just saying, like, so if it's too much, just rebuild it. I think that's a good message. Like, don't try to fix the unfixable, to be honest.
But even then, with rebuilding takes a lot of time. If you look at some other places that have had very large compromises, replacing and rebuilding 800 internal applications and associated servers. Yeah, good luck.
Let's do that in a second episode, because I got a feeling that there's a lot more.
Yeah, I mean, how are you going to deal with that, right?
Let's keep that in mind for a follow-up, because this could be a good series. For now, this was it for this episode of IT Horror Stories. You can always find us on Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, Deezer, wherever you find your podcast. We do a few episodes a month at ithorrorstories.eu. We have merchandise, shop.ithorrorstories.eu, or you can support us via Ko-fi. There is social media. There is Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, LinkedIn, Blue Sky, Mastodon, and some other stuff that is out there. Thank you for tuning in. Christoph, thank you for sharing your story, your misery, your solutions, and your input. Very much appreciated. And don't forget, everybody, you are one of us, and we will hear you in the next one. Bye-bye.
The content of this podcast is intended for entertainment purposes only and is meant to humorously explore various tech-related situations. Any resemblance to actual events or real persons, living or dead, is purely coincidental. We ridicule situations, never individuals or groups. Listener discretion is advised, and we encourage everyone to approach technology with a sense of humor and an open mind.